building laser death beams to destroy the USSR.
Wow, that's another thing. Wow.
So that's Lyndon LaRouche. But there is yet another major intellectual influence on MAGA communism, one which MAGA communists acknowledge.
To be fair, I would say that Infrared and myself are definitely influenced by the philosopher Aleksandr Dugin. Like, that would be fair to say. But the party is not, in any way. The party is not. I am one of the only people in the party who has read Dugin. I think I'm the only one in leadership who's actually read Dugin. Maybe Jackson has, I don't know. But granted, I'm chairman, but Dugin's ideas are not on our reading list. They're not mandatory, but I have a very specific dialogue with Dugin's philosophy, which is out in the open. It's not a secret, and you can read it yourself.
Much more openly, and that's Aleksandr Dugin. So let's talk about him. Aleksandr Dugin was born on January 7th, 1962. His father was a colonel in Soviet intelligence, and the details of his earlier life are unclear and contradictory for whatever reason. Dugin began his political activity in the 1980s, first joining a secret group of Moscow intellectuals who dabbled in occult neo-Nazism, which is a great start. One of Dugin's contributions to the group.
The Russian underground dissident scene was super edgy, and it was edginess. When you understand neo-Nazism in Russia, you have to understand it as a concrete thing. You can't just say this group of edgy LARPers trying to be shocking and provocative. That's the essence of neo-Nazism. You have to actually analyze, importantly, violence and rhetoric against Russia's minorities. That was what made neo-Nazism decisively a real phenomena, right? It was about the sentiment against Russia's national minorities, ethnic minorities, which Dugin never participated in.
Group translating the work of Italian fascist philosopher Julius Ovella, who famously called himself a...
It would not be too unfair to say Ovella was a fascist, but the tradition of he's coming from was traditionalism, which comes from René Guénon, and Dugin absolutely engaged with this tradition, but he always actually rejected fascism as a concrete historical phenomenon. Like, he rejected Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy, always.
Super fascist. Later in the 1980s, Dugin moved away from Nazism and toward Russian ultranationalism. He joined the anti-Semitic ultranationalist organization and sat on its central council. As the Soviet Union approached collapse, Dugin visited the West and made contact with leading figures in the European New Right, and the experience appears to have greatly influenced the development of Dugin's political philosophy.
I want to show you an interesting article Dugin wrote about his views on the European... what the hell? Where the hell is it? So off Google. I think I have to look on fucking Yandex. Here it is. Okay. So this is the website. Whatever. So he wrote this in 2004, but Dugin here, sorry, what the hell is my mic? It's called Lenin Avatar of Rage, Red Avatar of Rage. I said, I used to hate Leninism, but something changed. All the people that were the worst scum started denouncing Lenin. But here he says something I like, where I found it interesting. He said, Lenin declared he was a magic Eurasian dwarf who raised jihad on the world of exploiters, smashed the brain of the Philistine, mobilized the nation for total upheaval. Let me find the thing that I wanted to point out, though. Here. Okay, look. In Europe, I met many Guenonians and Indians. Some of them were sloppy schizophrenics, others obedient and politically correct Philistines. They work in banks, marketing. They're a bunch of misfits incapable of original thinking, deeds, I don't endorse this, but whatever, or any effective historical action of the slightest importance. The only thing they do is whine and squabble over trivia and grumble around at the world around which they don't understand and are pathologically afraid of. So it sounds like a lot of this contact he makes with the European New Right does not reflect his expectations. The actual he starts saying that the Red Brigades in the RAF is 100 times more attractive than the majority of these European traditionalists. So it's interesting because it's not a one-sided picture. This guy's trying to paint a one-sided picture. It's just, if you know who Dugin is, it's not true that he is a far right. It's not true. He is a uniquely Russian thinker, and the Western political axis of political difference doesn't make full sense in the Russian context. For example, the National Bolshevik Party. I was not always confident in saying this, but I am now. National Bolshevik Party in Russia was most definitely a radical left-wing party, and it still has that association to this day. No one in Russia associates it with Nazism. No one. I asked about the flag, by the way. I literally asked. I said, look, why is that flag looking like that, and why is it called National Bolshevik? It sounds like National Socialist. They told me was this provocateur who was trying to mock the red-brown accusations that were coming from the new Yeltsin elites. So he did this to troll them, basically, is what I was told. Maybe they were wrong, but that's what I was told. But I know for a fact that they were a left-wing phenomena in Russia. Absolutely they were. If you go to Russia, travel there and talk to people, you will learn the truth. They are associated with the radical left. Always were. Even ultra-left. Actually, we sympathize more with the KPRF, but KPRF are much more moderately left-wing compared to these guys. These guys were radical anarchists in a way. So it's very much misunderstood thing in the West because of their name and their flag.
In 1993, he co-founded the National Bolshevik Party, National Socialism, National Bolshevism, MAGA Communism, same shit.
Oh man. Really no. Really no. Really no. In the case of the National Bolsheviks, it's so stupid. Like, why would you show the ACP's...
1993, he co-founded the National Bolshevik Party, National Socialism, National Bolshevik, MAGA Communism.
But this is the ACP logo. This is not a MAGA communist logo. What are you talking about?
Same
also, the National Bolshevik thing was deliberate trolling. So, okay, fine. But why ACP? What did we do? Oh, because I am philosophically influenced by Dugin. I got it. Yeah. I guess that makes everything Nazi. That's really brilliant reasoning there. Don't even read what I said about Dugin. Just do this thing of this logical fallacy of guilt by association, and that's all you need to do.
Dugin's career as an intellectual took off in the 1990s, particularly with his publication of The Foundation of Geopolitics in 1997, which quickly became influential among Russian nationalists and elite military...
So he goes... It's so funny, like, National Socialism is the same as national... No, it's not. It's a fundamentally distinct phenomena. Because the National Bolsheviks were not engaging in violent pogroms against minorities, and they also sociologically and materially had nothing in common with Nazism. Only aesthetically, there seemed to be something with the flag and the name. But materially speaking, according to the analysis of the Comintern in the 1930s, no. Fascism is a specific phenomenon.
Circles, and his ideology is basically just Russian imperialist nationalism, calling for a vast Russian empire which absorbs all of the former Soviet Union, dominates Europe, and drives the US back to the Western Hemisphere.
God forbid NATO gets abolished.
Western sources are sometimes prone to exaggerating Dugin's influence in Russia and making it sound as though Dugin is writing Russian foreign policy, which he isn't. But Dugin is...
Oh yeah, Dugin has no influence. Believe what you want. Sorry, anyway.
Still a prominent intellectual with a good deal of influence in the Russian political and military establishments. He is a leading intellectual of the ultra-nationalist far right in Russia, which...
No, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. That would be Antonovsky. Again, dude, it's not true. It's not fucking true. I try to not be a bullshitter, and I'm just going to tell you the truth about what's going on in Russia's political scene. If Dugin was ever affiliated with the far right, that was an older generation. There's a new red-white war going on in Russia's cultural intellectual sphere about the legacy of Bolshevism and the Russian Revolution, with the new far being like O-canonists. That all comes from the guys from the Telegram, Sons of the Monarchy, led by a guy named Antonovsky. And on the left side is Zakhar Prilepin, Comrade Zakhar Prilepin. He is the bulwark of defending the integrity and history of Bolshevik Revolution and the Soviet era and communist ideas in general in the literary, cultural, and intellectual philosophical scene, I would say. And Dugin is not in the middle, but he is closer to Comrade Zakhar. He is closer. He is closer. Not all the way there, but he's more sympathetic. That is why Dugin likes me and Jackson. He doesn't buy into the far right, at least not fully. So there is a far right in Russia. Dugin is not the leader of the far right in Russia. Because also, there's a few things the far right in Russia is characterized by. One is the historical revisionism, anti-Soviet, anti-communism. That doesn't characterize Dugin at all. The second thing is, this is the most important thing, I would argue, because it has more material significance. This kind of Russia as a white European identity versus Eurasianism. And Dugin is much more the latter. He's fully the latter. Dugin rejects the notion of a Russian ethno-state, nation-state. He wants to embrace all of Russia's ethnic and national minorities into one Eurasian identity that includes all of them. And that makes him distinct from the far right, because the far right is playing up on a lot of anti-immigrant and anti-minority sentiments and ethnic hatred and ethnic exclusion about Muslims and about all these minorities and so on. And Dugin is left-wing with respect to that. He's Eurasian. He's a Eurasian. There are so many nuances here, but Dugin is not the leader of the far right in Russia. That's a ridiculous claim.
Which makes it very strange that MAGA communists display such admiration for Dugin. Hinkle and Haas like Dugin.
No, because we actually understand Russia, and you don't know a fucking thing except Wikipedia, you fucking moron.
They really like Dugin. According to Haas, Marxist theory in the West is meaningless without the insights of Dugin. Jackson Hinkle.
You know what? I'll fucking die on that hill. Every fucking philosopher who is able to advance human thinking forward under the nose of retarded Western Marxists needs to be given tribute for inadvertently contributing to the advance of Marxist-Leninist thinking. And I actually will die on the hill that Dugin has contributed to that indirectly. And I argue elaborately why. I have an argument, and you haven't engaged with it. You just, again, are playing up this guilt by association shit instead of addressing the content of my argument.
Calls him one of the greatest men alive today, and Haas and Hinkle have conducted gushing interviews with Dugin himself a number of times.
Dugin is great. He is a great thinker and a great human being.
Affinity for Dugin goes a long way to explain the multipolarity fixation of MAGA communists. MAGA communists are obsessed with
it's all because of Dugin.
Bipolarity, and in their
right, that's so true. Why did I take interest in Dugin to begin with, though? Have you explored that, or no? It doesn't matter. All right, sure, whatever you say. You're the expert on me, more than me. I've been a fucking Marxist since 2010, but more about who I am and why I'm influenced by who I'm influenced by. It's all because of LaRouche and the Babylonian of a Neoplatonist.
Geopolitical stance. They are very radically anti-Western. They present their anti-Westernism as a Marxist anti-imperialism, but in fact, it clearly stems from their far-right ideology. They see the liberal West as too woke, and they find ideological kinship with right-wing anti-liberal forces outside the West. Their anti-liberalism is fascist rather than Marxist. Hence,
how?
Their adulation of Dugin, who most definitely is not.
Okay, hold on. Their anti-liberal is not Marxist, it's fascist. Hence, their friendliness with Dugin. But we have to establish Dugin as a fascist first, in order for that chain of reasoning to be correct.
An anti-imperialist thinker, and they mix it with this idea of the British financial cabal ruling the West, and hence there's...
I think it's true that the capitalist class concretely does take the form of a developed imperial hegemony that originates with the British Empire, but has evolved since then, obviously. But it's become this diverse, all-inclusive, global, in the sense of representing all cultures. No, because the Turkish capitalist class is a comprador class. The capitalist class in all nations are comprador classes in the chain of the system of imperialism. And only the people that were there from the beginning have maintained their hegemony.
Their support for Russia and China to fight this international cabal. And Jackson Hinkle lives in Moscow now.
Support Russia and China to fight the concrete imperial hegemony that rules the world today, the American global empire. Not the British, the American global empire, because the British Empire was absorbed, or at least fused with, the global American empire. So there's no need to talk about the British Empire here.
Apparently,
very plainly, it's a unipolar hegemony led by the U.S., which we, of course, support Russia and China against. Now make the connection to fascism, please.
Permanently, take from that what you will. However,
okay, what, is Russia now LaRouche?
And Hinkle are also invested in presenting a communist disguise. They claim to be Marxist-Leninist.
Dude, I was a Marxist-Leninist probably before you even fucking knew how to spell the name of Karl Marx. Okay, you probably spelled it as M-A-R-C-K-S before.
And they're invested in keeping up this pretense and proclaiming themselves the only true communist organization in America.
The disguise thing is so retarded, it makes no sense. Why do we need a disguise when everyone is just openly being a fucking Hitler right now? We would get way more money and followers if we did that. Why would we need it? Why? What's the point of this theory that we're disguising ourselves?
Championing a far-right ultra-nationalist philosopher complicates it.
But all the nuances are lost on you, you fucking retard. It's like Dugin is not a neo-Nazi. He's not a fascist. He's just not a Marxist. No one said he's a Marxist. He's a non-Marxist thinker that I find to be very valuable in the synthesis of a new Marxism, or a new application of Marxism to the 21st century.
Efforts to pose as communists, so they just deny that Dugin...
Why would we pose as communists? What's the point of that, you fucking retard?
Fascist.
What's the fucking point? To steal Hassan Piker's viewers, who are not even communists?
According to Haas, the idea that Dugin is a fascist is a myth invented by liberals.
Thank God you fucking at least have some familiarity with the actual argument, but you're not even citing the argument. You're just simplifying it.
And woke leftists, Dugin is just misunderstood and unfairly maligned.
That's true, and I explain how that is and why that is. Will you engage with that?
According to Haas, Hinkle also takes a deep offense at anyone who calls...
Hold on, you're not even going to engage with the argument? You're just going to use it as indictment on me that say that I'm disguising myself?
Dugin a fascist? Hinkle characterizes Dugin as the foremost philosopher of a multipolarity. He's not a fascist, he's a great anti-imperialist thinker. This is helped by the fact that Dugin himself denies that he's a fascist.
And what would be your response to them? That the notion that you are somehow a fascist or adjacent to fascism or something like that?
I reject radically the metaphysical basis of liberalism, individualism, modernity, idea of progress, linear time, and I am not reject as well enlightenment in general and modernity, Western modernity, hegemonic process. So, and the same, I refuse communism and fascism. And I've written my book, Forced Political Theory, that clearly stated my position.
So according to Dugin, he isn't a fascist, he just rejects modernity, the idea of progress, and the Enlightenment in
So did Ayatollah Khomeini and Hassan, by the way.
entirely non-fascistic way. Okay,
just like Khomeini. Are you going to say Iran is fascist?
but whether you want to apply the label of a fascist,
He just said okay, so what are you going to say now? What's your argument? What's your counter argument, Brandon? Zoom with the 25. Wow, man, thank you.
Dugin's politics, and I think Dugin is definitely a fascist, but setting that aside,
Why are you setting that aside? Your whole argument hinges on the idea that he's a fascist in order to prove that we're wearing a communist disguise to promote fascism. Don't fucking run away from it now. Wow, William Jennings with the 21. Wow, man, thank you.
even if you dispute that Dugin is a fascist, he is undeniably far-right and ultra-nationalist, and
No, but how is he far right and Dude, you don't know what you're fucking talking about. It's so frustrating. You've never been to Russia. You don't know anything about Russian politics. If you knew 1% anything about Russian politics, A, he's not far right. The far right people want to reverse and dismantle the whole legacy of communism, and they hate the non-white minorities. That's not Dugin. He's not far, okay? Second, the thing about ultranationalism, that can have two potential meanings. One is ethnic nationalism. That is indeed affiliated with the global right, but that's not Dugin. He's a Eurasian. It's an inclusive. It's not, he rejects nationalism. He said nationalism is a European principle of the nation state. He says we support civilization states, which that's what he calls Russia is, because it's not one nation according to him. So calling him an ultranationalist is wrong. Now, if you want to talk about he has great power projections for Russia, sure, but that's the only bare minimum of an anti-imperialist position you can have in Russia, because that's the position that is inversely proportional to the hegemony of basically the U.S. legacy of U.S. occupation and the restoration of Soviet power, basically. He doesn't say that as restoration of Soviet power, but the Russians who are patriotic, who want to expand Russia and in some way restore its territorial integrity, those are the consistent opponents of American unipolar hegemony, and they do not affirm any kind of racism because it means mixing with more minorities and restoring Soviet-era diversity.
and this doesn't look like an ingenious 18D chess synthesis of Dugin's philosophy with Marxism.
But how would you know? Because you don't even know. I don't know if it would matter if you made an effort. I don't know if you have the cognitive capacity to even. How would you know? You don't even have the cognitive capacity to actually follow through any kind of reading of what I've written on the matter. You don't know. Yes, it could very well be a really brilliant 18D chess synthesis or application of Dugin's ideas or interpretation of Dugin under the lens of Marxism. You wouldn't know because you're not even intelligent enough to comprehend, apparently, specific philosophical position I articulate.
Hinkle want to portray. It just looks like two American far-right ultranationalists taking inspiration from a Russian far-right.
It looks like this. I haven't done any reading. I don't know anything about who Dugin is. I haven't read him. I haven't read what Haas has said about him. I didn't watch Haas's lectures about him. But it definitely looks this way. What a profound, brilliant line of argumentation here.